It was just after 8 p.m. on a Thursday, and I was ready to call it a night. I'd been driving since noon, and my last few fares were nothing special. Small trips, barely a few bucks each. I told myself I'd take one more ride if it came in before 8:30. And yes, a ping came in from a shopping plaza across town. I figured it was someone who worked late, maybe a retail shift or closing up at one of the restaurants. The destination was a suburban neighborhood just outside the city. Easy fare, 25 minutes tops, so I just took it. I pulled up to the curb and saw her immediately, a woman in her 30s, well-dressed, with tired eyes, and two little girls beside her. They looked like twins. Same age, maybe 8 or 9. Matching blue jackets. Same tight braids. And completely silent. They didn't hold hands. Didn't play. They just stood there, watching me. The woman gave a polite smile as they got in. She sounded exhausted, not annoyed, not angry, just drained. I smiled back, made a note of the address, and started driving. But I couldn't stop glancing in the mirror. The girls sat perfectly still, not whispering to each other, not looking out the windows, just staring at me, not blinking, not shifting. Their little faces reflected in the rear view like porcelain dolls, pale, wide-eyed, and too still. I tried to shake it off. Maybe they were just shy or exhausted. You know, kids can be weird. Long day of shopping and excitement, I get it. But about 10 minutes into the ride, something clicked in my brain. Neither of them were buckled in. I always notice that. It's a habit. Safety first, especially when kids are involved. And here they were, sitting upright, no seatbelts across their chests, no sounds of buckles clicking when they got in. I glanced at the woman through the mirror and said gently, "Hey, I can pull over real quick if you want to buckle them in." She turned to look at me with this puzzled expression, like I just asked her if she had a pet dragon. She asked, "Who am I buckling in?" At first, I thought she was joking, but there was no smile, no sarcasm, just confusion. Blank, quiet confusion. I said, "Your daughters, the two little girls in the back?" She turned around in her seat slowly, then looked back at me. My hands went cold. I nearly swerved, and then she blinked and said quietly, "What do you mean?" I came alone. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. My brain screamed at me to pull over, so I did. Fast. I slammed on the brakes, pulled to the shoulder, and turned around in my seat. The back seat was empty. No tiny jackets, no matching braids, just the woman, sitting dead center, like she'd been alone the entire time. My skin crawled. I didn't speak the rest of the drive. Neither did she. She just stared out the window, arms folded, like nothing strange had happened at all. When we arrived, she thanked me again, calm, polite, almost gentle, then walked up to her apartment like any normal passenger would. I sat there in silence for a long time, before I finally drove off. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had ridden with us. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those faces in the rear view. Wide, pale, unblinking eyes that didn't feel quite human. So I did something I never do. I Googled the neighborhood, looked up the street, local news, community forums, anything. And that's when I found it. An article. 10 years old. A local tragedy. Twin sisters. Hit by a drunk driver on the exact stretch of road I'd just driven. They were walking home from school with their mother. She survived. They didn't. The photo in the article hit me like a punch to the chest. 2 girls, blue jackets, braided hair, and dead-eyed smiles. It happened on October 12th. I looked at the date on my phone. October 12th. 10 years. To this day. If you felt something watching you during this story, you're not alone. Strange things tend to happen after people hear these tales. So before your lights flicker or your screen goes dark, comment and share it, so you're not the only one haunted. And whatever you do, subscribe before midnight, because they always notice the quiet ones. I drive long distance for a living. Uber, Lyft, whatever keeps the gas paid. Well, the money's in the long fares. Less traffic, fewer drunks, and better tips. So when a ride request popped up one Friday evening for a trip nearly 3 hours into the mountains, I didn't hesitate. The pickup, a small town diner just off the highway. And the drop-off? Someplace I'd never heard of, way up past Coldwater Ridge. No streetlights, no cell towers, just forest. She was waiting out front when I arrived. Late 20s maybe. Pale, dark hair tucked under a hoodie. She moved like someone sleepwalking. Slow, deliberate, no phone, no small talk. I asked, headed to Hillside Point? She nodded once and climbed in. She barely said a word the first hour, just sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring out the window as the woods got thicker and the road more narrow. I remember thinking she didn't blink much. The silence was heavy, not awkward, just wrong, like the kind of quiet you hear in a room after someone dies. Then, about halfway up the ridge, she leaned forward, close to the center console, and asked, "You still live on Willow Drive?" My knuckles went white on the wheel. I felt it before I understood it. This cold drop in my gut, like falling. Willow Drive was where I lived. My house, my porch, my life. I hadn't even told her that. It wasn't on my profile. It was not connected to anything Uber shows. I looked at her in the mirror and asked, "What did you say?" She smiled soft, too soft, and whispered, "You left the porch light on." I stared straight ahead, jaw tight. My heart thudded like I was suddenly being chased. And then, tilting her head, she added, "Don't worry, I turned it off for you." That's when I pulled over. Fast. I asked her to get out. I didn't even turn around. I just felt her back there. Wrong and heavy. She didn't argue. Just unbuckled, opened the door, and stepped out into the dark. She stood there on the side of the road, not moving, not saying anything, just watching me as I hit the gas. I drove like the forest was on fire behind me. I didn't stop, didn't breathe, just tore down the mountain road, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds, like she might be closer. I don't remember most of the ride home, but I remember the feeling, like something was sitting in my back seat, invisible, but pressing on my lungs. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't even kill the engine. I looked up at the porch. The light was off. I always leave it on. It's on a timer. Smart bulb. I checked it 3 times before I left. Even tested it by app. But that night, nothing. No warm yellow glow. No welcome home. Just the black outline of my front door. I sat there for a long time. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. Then I turned the engine off, stepped out, and walked to the porch, heart hammering like it wanted to burst through my ribs. And when I reached for the door, I noticed the doormat was crooked, like someone had stood there, like someone had stepped inside. This was during the peak of the COVID lockdown. Roads were empty. Curfews were still in place. The kind of silence you only hear when the world has stopped. I was still driving nights. Not because I had to, but because it helped clear my head. Fewer people. No drunk passengers. Mostly essential workers, like hospital staff, heading home after long shifts. That night, my last ride was with a nurse. I picked her up from a 24-hour urgent care clinic on the outskirts of town. She looked worn down, but tired. The kind of tired that goes beyond just a long shift. She said she was heading back to a rural town about 30 minutes out, past the state highway. I didn't mind the drive. It was peaceful out there. No lights, no traffic, just trees and long, empty roads. About halfway through the trip, we came up on a bend in the road. That's when I saw the cones. Flashing orange lights. Reflectors. And a man in a construction vest waving a flashlight side to side, signaling for me to slow down. At first, I thought nothing of it. Seemed like some emergency repair, maybe a downed power line or a sinkhole. He was wearing a hard hat, standing right in the middle of the road like he was in charge. I rolled the window halfway down as I slowed the car, and that's when the nurse leaned over and grabbed my arm. Then she whispered, "Don't stop! There's no construction scheduled tonight." Her voice was tight, low, urgent. I looked at her. She wasn't guessing. She knew. And in that split second, my stomach turned to ice. The tires screeched as we swerved past the man in the vest. He jumped back, waving the flashlight wildly as we blew past the cones and kept driving straight into the dark. Neither of us said a word for a few seconds. Then we looked back, and what we saw still messes with my head. There weren't any vehicles, no utility trucks, no work lights, no equipment. Just 3 men, stepping out of the woods, flashlights in hand, wearing masks, not the medical kind. The other kind, blank, white, like Halloween. Cheap, faceless things. They just stood there, watching us drive away. I didn't stop until we hit a gas station 20 minutes later. We sat there under the floodlights, both of us shaking, neither one quite sure what almost happened. I reported it the next day, called non-emergency, gave the location, described what I saw. The officer I spoke to was dead silent for a moment, and then he sighed and said, "You're the 3rd call this week." Apparently, 2 other drivers had reported the same thing. Flashing cones, men in vests, out on that same road after midnight. No one was ever there when officers went to check. And one driver, he never made it home. They found his car in a ravine 2 miles off the highway, but no sign of him, just boot prints in the dirt, leading away into the trees. After I got off the call with the officer, I couldn't sleep. Over the next few days, I checked the news, the local forums, even police blotters. Nothing. No follow-up, no statements. Like it had just disappeared. And a week later, I got a message request on my rideshare account. It was from the nurse. "Thanks again. I haven't taken the highway since. You shouldn't either." That was it. I tried replying, but her account was deleted. Gone, like she'd wiped herself off the app entirely. And maybe she had a reason to. Maybe she knew something I didn't. The way she grabbed my arm. The certainty in her voice. It's like she'd seen them before. Like she knew what would happen if we stopped. And sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't listened. Would I have vanished too? Now, every time I see cones at night, I don't slow down. I don't look. I keep my doors locked, my eyes ahead, and my foot on the gas. Because sometimes, the detour isn't meant to help you avoid something. Sometimes, it is a trap. This happened last fall. It was around 11:30 p.m., late enough that the streets were quiet, but not so late that I was worried about the usual creeps. I got a ping for a pickup just outside the city limits. It was kind of a rural area, lots of trees, no streetlights, one of those long dirt driveways you'd miss if you blinked. But the location matched the pin, so I pulled in. And there she was, standing near the edge of the gravel, where the woods start. She looked off, pale, expressionless, wearing an oversized hoodie with the hood up. Her arms were hanging stiff at her sides. She wasn't scrolling her phone or anything, just staring, like she'd been waiting there a long time. I rolled the window down slightly and asked, "You call for a ride?" She didn't answer, just got in. No hi, no name, no destination. She sat in the back seat, never made eye contact, and whispered, "Just drive." Now, I've seen all kinds of weird things at this job, and I figured maybe she was running from a bad situation, maybe a fight, maybe worse. So I nodded and pulled out. About 2 minutes into the drive, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. Passenger canceled ride. What? I looked at the app. Same trip, same address. It said she canceled it. I peeked into the rearview and said, "Hey, did you just cancel the ride? That messes with the insurance." She didn't answer. She didn't even blink. Then she leaned forward, just enough that I could hear her breath, and whispered, "You shouldn't have picked me up." My entire body tensed. It was like the air in the car changed. Thicker, heavier, cold. I slammed the brakes and turned around in my seat. But the back seat was empty. No door had opened, no footsteps in the gravel, no sound. Nothing. Just an empty seat and a lingering chill in the air. I got out, thinking maybe she somehow slipped out. Maybe I zoned out. I checked around the car, the road, the woods. No one. I was out there alone. Later that night, after I got home, I checked my trip history. I wanted to make sense of it. Maybe I'd glitched the app somehow. The name on the canceled ride? Catherine. At first, it didn't register. Then I did what everyone does in these moments. I Googled it, and there it was. Catherine Gray, 23 years old, killed in a hit and run. Right there, on that same road, almost exactly a year ago. The article showed a photo, a still from her social media. Same oversized hoodie, same dead stare. I didn't want to believe it. I kept refreshing the page, reopening the app, checking the time of the ping, the pickup, the cancellation. Everything lined up. And then I noticed something else. The notification, it didn't show up on my email, didn't log in my SMS alerts either. But the app showed it in the history. But there was no transaction. No record of a charge. No location trail. Like the ride never happened. Like she never existed. But I remember her. I heard her voice. I wanted to believe she was lost. And now, sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night, I catch a flicker in the mirror. Just a shadow. Just for a second. And every time, I slow down near that road. Just in case. In case she's waiting again. And I know she's still out there. Waiting.